As I may have mentioned before, I'm a Downton Abbey fan. So I want to use an example from Downton Abbey that we can discuss on the discussion board. And that's the issue of aristocratic privilege. Aristocrats had all kinds of special privileges that weren't available to other people. And there was a certain amount of injustice in that. But it could also be used for good in certain circumstances. So let me show you a couple scenes from Downton Abbey. The first one involves the family butler for the Crawley family. That's the wealthy noble family. It turns out he used to sing and dance on stage, I guess something like American vaudeville. And he's embarrassed by this. He wants to be seen as this very dignified person, and he's embarrassed by this. And basically, his old partner is coming back to blackmail him. Now, here's what happens when his employer, Lord Grantham, speaks to the man who's trying to blackmail the butler.
Apparently, Downton Abbey must be really popular because every library in town seems to have the first season checked out. Right? So I'll just briefly go over the scene. To make things a little easier, because there's two people involved, right? If I slouch down and take off my glasses, right, I'm giving the perspective of the working class guy. If I sit up very straight and look down my nose, then I'm doing the nobleman. Okay, so here's what basically happens. The working class guy is trying to get some money out of the butler, and he tells the nobleman the truth, which is that the butler had been a song and dance man on the stage in Britain. Right? So, and he wants some money from the butler. So, what does the nobleman do? Well, the nobleman says, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a check for £20, and you're going to take it, and you're going to leave here and never come back in this area again. And if I find you here, I'll have you put in jail. Now, the working class guy gets mad. He takes the money, but he says, one of these days, people like you are going to have to toe the line like the rest of us. And the snooty nobleman says, well, yes, perhaps, but fortunately for my butler, that day is not today. So that's the basic scene.
That's a relatively minor example, but here's one that's more serious. Right? There's someone, they call her the Dower Countess. Basically, she's the widowed mother of the Earl of Grantham, played by Maggie Smith. Now, she's maneuvered to keep some of her servants from having to go to war. In particular, there's a young man named Thomas who very much wants to enlist and serve in World War I. But his father, out of obedience to his father, he won't do so. Okay, his father was a widower, and Thomas is an only child. So basically, Lady Grantham told a lie, right, without William's knowledge, to keep him out of the war. Basically, she told the local doctor, right, who's involved with the draft, that William had a heart condition, and he was embarrassed to talk about it. So he said, can he just not be sent for the physical exam? And the doctor believed her and agreed. Now then, right, her cousin finds out, and here's the conversation that happens.
I make no apology. It would be a terrible thing if poor old Mr. Molesley's son were killed, wouldn't it, Molesley?
I'm sure it would, but...
And then I heard William's father would be left on his own if anything happened to the boy. And what would become of Carson if the last of his staff were to go?
That's not the point.
Do you want Molesley to die?
Of course I don't.
Well...
I don't want my own son to die either, but this is a war, and we must be in it together. High and low, rich and poor. There can be no special cases, because every man at the front is a special case to someone.
Mrs. Crawley is right. I understand your motives, Lady Grantham, and I do not criticise them.
Thank you.
But I shall write to the Ministry at once, correcting the misinformation. Good day. I'll see myself.
Molesley, you understand why I said what I did?
Indeed, I do, ma'am.
You won't be called up at once. Not while there are younger men to be taken.
But they'll get you in the end, Molesley. And you can blame Mrs. Crawley when they do.
Now notice Mrs. Crawley, right, that's the younger woman, the cousin, says something, supposed to be a progressive, right? And she says something that's very much a hallmark of liberalism, right, in some people's view, which is that we must always all be in this together, high and low, rich and poor, no exceptions. Right? And yet what she's doing and she has a point, right? This is unfair to all the other fathers, all the other widowed fathers whose only son is being drafted to go off to war. But on the other hand, it's an act of mercy. It's a kindness that's being done to someone who's very poor by someone who's very rich. And it's being blocked by this demand that we must have uniform rules. So what do you think? Is the society becoming better or worse when we make these exceptions?